of language, and in that way create logical puzzles and problems that are really not problems at all, but just arise from abuses of language. This is the way he puts it. The work of the philosopher consists in assembling reminders for a particular purpose. If you tried to advance philosophical theses, it would never be possible to question them, because they'd have to be about words and everybody would agree. So philosophy does not develop theories of its own. It is still a therapeutic kind of activity, dissolving problems, answering the question which he puts, how do we get the fly out of the bottle? How do you get a fly in a bottle? Have to get it out? No, how do you get the fly out of the bottle? Puzzle. So philosophy really is in this business of clearing up confusions on the basis of a much looser, broader kind of empirical approach to human behaviors and human language behaviors. Now, one example which he uses may help. He has a little book that actually comes from some lectures he gave called On Certainty. Now, obviously, the topic is epistemology. And what he's doing is taking on one of the demands of Enlightenment epistemology, the demand for certainty. If you like, he is a postmodern criticizing Enlightenment epistemology. Okay? Now, he starts by referring to G.E. Moore's famous lecture before the British Academy in which he was going to prove that two material objects exist. Remember? Here is one. Here is a hand. I know this is a hand. Now, what do we mean when we say something like that? I know this is a hand. Where my behavior, Moore's behavior, show that I know this is a hand. And the words simply reiterate it. Well, it means, it makes no sense to doubt it. It makes no sense to doubt it. This is a hand. I know is sort of a guarantee I give you, my personal assurance, that it's a hand, not a false something or other I'm just holding up to you. But in addition, the claim that I know is claiming that a whole picture of the world is basically correct. I know is part of a much larger, coherent worldview, in which there are certain basic beliefs, as he calls them. So he has a, if you like, a common sense realism that is argued for from the verbal behaviors that are involved. That's Ryle. I take it back, that's Wittgenstein. Now, a couple of words about Gilbert Ryle, who, into the 50s and 60s, was still publishing. Two books of his that I'll refer to. One is called Dilemmas, and the other, The Concept of Mind. Dilemmas, yeah, it's about philosophical disputes, philosophical problems, realism versus idealism, freedom and determinism, mind and body, science and religion, which is right. And posing them as alternatives seems to put you on the horns of a dilemma. Well, he has a whole book dealing with these dilemmas. And his point is that they are false dilemmas, pseudo-problems. They are disputes over the territory that language covers. They represent what he calls, and this is a notion for which Ryle is quite famous, they represent category mistakes. Category mistakes. Where one word is used in two different categories, okay, so that you're equivocating, and there's no real dispute. Now, he illustrates the notion of categories, and he's talking of different language games. Words used in different language games can sometimes lead to confusion of language games. But he illustrates what he means. Take, for instance, that notable, worthy, delightful British sport of cricket. He says, well, there is the batsman, there's the bowler, call the pitcher. Here are the wickets, that's the sticks in the ground. There's the pitch, that's the 21 yards in between. But where's the team spirit? Oh, that's in a different category. It's not an empirical object like these other things. So he maintains that this is the way in which philosophical problems arise, the problem of sense perception. You know, do we perceive material objects or only sense data? Well, it depends whether you're using the language of neurophysiology or ordinary experience. If you're talking of perception in terms of ordinary experience, there the language game is such that you see material objects. If you're talking of sense perception in terms of neurophysiology, there the language game is such that you see sense data. What about freedom and determinism? Well, if you talk of human behaviors in terms of causal conditions, that's what the determinist does. But if you talk of the same behaviors in terms of responsibility, that's what the indeterminist does. You can talk of the same things and play two different games, the determinist game, the indeterminist game. Science and religion likewise. Mind and body likewise. Okay. Now, some people have picked up on that and said, oh, okay, then two languages can be complementary. And so they invoke the scientific complementarity principle. Remember the complementarity principle from physics, perhaps? How do we describe the way in which light is transmitted? Is it transmitted in waves or in particles? Well, why does it have to be either or? Complementarity suggests wavicles. There are two complementary things, complementary pictures of the same phenomenon. What could that be to say in this case? Well, in his concept of mind, he's not at all clear that it is the same, because there he talks about the mind-body problem. And what he's trying to do is to map out, and notice the vocabulary here, he's trying to map out the logical geography. That's a very familiar, popular phrase. You're doing logical geography when you're trying to sort things out. And if you're doing logical geography, you're trying to do some map work. So you're trying to map out the logical geography of the knowledge we already possess about mind. Not trying to find some new information. But to map out the geography of the knowledge we already possess. Already possess? Yes, in our language behaviors. Because the way we use language has developed and been tried and refined and tested over centuries of the history of language. And so it hides within those behaviors all sorts of tacit knowledge. And what he's trying to do in the concept of mind is to map out that tacit knowledge. Now, you notice that mind and body are both nouns. And so we slip into the habit of treating mind and body as two separate things. Mental states and physical states as two different categories of things. All that just because mind and body are both nouns. Misled by a superficial grammatical similarity rather than probing to the actual usages of the words in language behavior. You see. So he suggests we should think rather in terms of mind language and body language as having to do respectively with private as distinct from public behaviors. Conscious behaviors as distinct from physical behaviors. So that emotions and motives are simply private inclinations to behave in certain ways. They're subjective behaviors that incline us to certain objective behaviors. And when you say, I'm angry at what's going on in LA, you're saying something like, I want to yell at someone. You say the private feeling is a disposition to overt behaviors. Well, in that fashion, what he does is to translate all statements about mind and mental activity into behavioral statements. So he comes up with a version of the mind-body problem known as linguistic behavioralism. Mind language is simply language about private behaviors. Linguistic behavioralism. Not metaphysical language, no. But mental language is about actual or intended or possible bodily behaviors. That way. Well, it was that book of his, The Concept of Mind, which started a debate going on the philosophy of mind, which has been going on from the 1950s to the present day. And some of you have been taking philosophy of mind courses, so you know something about it. Incidentally, we've had two approaches to philosophy of mind recently. We had the course that Roberts did, which is much more philosophy of mind in terms of psychological states, emotions, inner dispositions. Okay? And you may have noted that Roberts' way of dealing with it, is in terms of an analysis of what we mean when we say, what we are doing when we say, what we have in mind when. You see, because his philosophical method is very much influenced by this ordinary language technique. From Wittgenstein, he occasionally teaches a Wittgenstein course, which he learned in his graduate work at Yale under Paul Holmer. So this is a method that he uses with a great deal of effectiveness, without limitations about metaphysics that some people have. On the other hand, if you've done some of the philosophy of mind stuff, which O'Connor does in contemporary metaphysics, you see, you've got a different method. But the point is that in the development of post-positivist metaphysics, the metaphysical side of philosophy of mind is developed as well as the philosophical psychology side of philosophy of mind. So that Roberts' interest is in the philosophical psychology side, or in the tradition of Gilbert Ryle, Wittgenstein. And O'Connor's approach is much more in the metaphysical side, in relationship more to philosophy of science. David? No, he's, if you try to pin him down on what is your view of mind, he would come out, I think, as something of an epiphenomenalist. That is to say that what is the reality underlying this brain processes. And there are mental phenomena which are the side effects of brain processes. So I think that Ryle is some kind of epiphenomenalist. Now, sometimes called a behaviorist, but only if you have a preface linguistic behaviorism. It's talk about mind, it's talk about private or public behaviors. As the case. And his view would be that the language about mind is translatable without remainder into behavior language, language about behaviors. So it's this translatability thing. Okay, now that was Ryle. Do you want to pause and reflect there before I head on? He introduces one thing that's become quite famous in the concept of the machine. He labels Descartes' view of mind as somehow or other in the body, as the myth of a ghost in a machine. Now that phrase, the ghost in a machine, has become famous. And you hear it quoted in all sorts of things. It's almost as famous as cogito ergo sum, really. It's one of those phrases that you find journalists pick up on, and so on and so forth. The myth of a ghost in a machine. What he's doing there is simply, he's in the process of arguing that simply because words mind and body are both nouns doesn't mean there is one entity inside another entity. The myth of a ghost in a machine. Okay, of the three people I'm discussing here, J.L. Austin, by all means, is the most fun. That's not a criterion of philosophical acumen, though it certainly helps the medicine down. Tremendous sense of humor, really. His book, How to Do Things with Words, published in 1955, tried to systematize different types of language usage. In other words, he thinks that in all this multitude of uses that Wittgenstein has introduced, there may be certain major types of utterance. And he tries to systematize those in a way that has been quite influential. He distinguishes, cognitive utterances, in the sense of assertions and propositions, from performative utterances of more varied sort. You remember I said that according to Ayer, the phrase "it is true that" is just a performative utterance. It doesn't add anything. It's rather doing something rather than asserting something. It's a performative utterance. All right, what he talks about are locutionary acts, illocutionary acts, and perlocutionary acts. Now, these are what we come to call nowadays language acts. That phrase, language acts, having been coined, I think it was coined, by John Searle, teaches at Berkeley, John Searle in his book Speech Acts. Speech Acts. And notice that in the notion of language acts, speech acts is the idea that the use of language is a kind of social behavior. All right, then, distinguish the locutionary from the illocutionary. A locutionary act is simply an act of saying something. Very general category. A locution. An utterance. But an illocutionary act is where you act in saying something. Hence, illocutionary. Perlocutionary, you act by means of saying something. Perlocutionary. Now, the example, an illocutionary act, the saying is itself the act. You're acting in saying it, announcing a verdict, answering a question, giving advice. In talking the way you're talking, you're giving advice. Perlocutionary, the language is just a means. You're persuading somebody to do something. You're stopping someone from doing something. You are annoying someone by what you're saying. The significance is not in what you're saying, but what you are trying to accomplish by means of saying it. You could have said something else, and might have worked as well. Again, getting at the variety of things we use. Well, that sort of thing introduces the notion of language acts, language behaviors, makes it very popular. But the other thing about J.L. Austin that you'll be interested in is his book Sense and Sensibilia. Now, notice the name is Austin. Are you familiar with another Austin? Jane Austen, whose book was Sense and Sensibility. That was a novel. This is J.L. Austin, Sense and Sensibilia. Not Jane, but John. Okay? Sense and Sensibilia. Just the title is a joke, and that's typical of Austin. I don't mean the whole book is a joke. I guess that makes it a perlocutionary act. He's telling a joke by means of language he's doing something else with. Okay? Now, this book is an attack on the sense-datum theory of A.J. Ayer. Not the A.J. Ayer of language, truth, and logic, but the A.J. Ayer of his book, I think, The Foundations of Empirical Knowledge. Because Ayer developed the view, a phenomenalist view, that all we know is sense such. Now, Austin argues in Sense and Sensibilia that this is due to his obsession with a few words and an oversimplification of their uses. Words which denote sense data, like blue, square, etc. Or expressions like looks, appears, seems, which are all twisted and taken to mean that ordinary sense perception suffers from such illusion that we can never be sure whether we're seeing a material object or not. So we say it appears, it looks, it seems. Okay. To get something of the style of the man, here's the way he begins. My general opinion about this doctrine is that it's a typically scholastic view, attributed first to an obsession with a few particular words, and second to an obsession with a few half-studied facts. The fact is, as I'll try to make clear, our ordinary words are much subtler in their uses, and make many more distinctions than philosophers have realized. And that the facts of perception, as discovered, for instance, by psychologists, but also as noted by common mortals, are much more diverse and complicated than has been allowed for. So I'm not going to maintain that we ought to be realists to embrace the doctrine that we do receive material objects. That question is too simple and entirely misleading. The important point is that the two terms, sense data and material things, live by taking in each other's washing. What's spurious is not one term, sense data, but the antithesis of the two. There's no one kind of thing we perceive, but very different kinds. The number being reducible, if at all, by scientific investigation and not by philosophy. So what we above all have to do is to rid ourselves of certain illusions argued by those like Berkeley, Hume, Russell, and Ayer, who have been most adept at working with the argument for an illusion based on the relativity of sense data. And in that way, he goes on to defend what really amounts to a common sense realism, that in seeing sense data